And I'm Ezra Ortiz.
And we are glad to be joined by Hannah Anderson. She's an author and a blogger and a writer and a speaker. And what else can we throw in there, Hannah? I mean, you seem to do it all.
A mother, a wife, a person who really enjoys making pies and puzzles, which I think those are the more important things about me, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now we can talk. I mean, we're talking pie. What kind of pie are we making, though, Hannah?
Well, in the summertime, it's blackberry pie. We don't always have enough blackberries to make it to winter. We usually turn them into jam. But this last week for Thanksgiving, we had an apple pie, pecan, and pumpkin. So it's really been a
pecan pie. That's my favorite.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. I love it. All right. Well, so speaking of last week, how was your Thanksgiving? Did you have a good time with family?
We did. My husband's parents and his sister and brother-in-law came in. So we hosted, and I kind of switched from being really busy with writing and speaking to being really busy with baking, which is a switch I'm happy to make. So I spent the first couple of days of last week prepping everything, trying to get it ready before Thursday. So Thursday was really nice.
Well, and speaking of baking, I did see on one of your podcasts, you had a little debate about cake or pie. Now, I'm assuming since you mentioned pie, you were on the pie side of the debate.
I was, but I have to tell you that this has been a debate within our own household. Like, this isn't a theoretical debate. This is a debate.
It's an actual,
real legitimate pain, because where I grew up, the measure of taking care of people was making them pies. And so I was raised and taught how to make pies, perfected pies. And then I married my husband, Nathan, who was raised in an area where cake was the way you showed love. So I feel like we've been trying to catch up with that for the last 20 years. I'm still not great at cake. I'll make him pie. But whenever we're at like a dinner or a church supper or something and there's cake, he bypasses my pie.
A house divided.
Yeah, you might need to get some counseling for that. No, that's a tough one for me. I love both cake and pie, especially if it's buttercream frosting. If it's another kind of frosting, I can skip that and go with the pie because I love a good pecan pie. But that's a tough one. You're right. It may never be settled in our lifetime, at least.
Now, I just figure at the marriage supper of the Lamb, we all will have the pies and cakes that fulfill what God has placed in our hearts, and it will be perfected. And it won't be a measure of love anymore.
No.
It will just be, God's abounding grace to us.
And they'll be perfectly baked, golden, just right. So
that was beautiful.
All the tears that have been shed over imperfect pies and cakes.
Yes,
there you go.
An endless dessert table. I'm ready for heaven right now. That's going to be fun. All right. So speaking of heaven, that's what we're talking about today. Is your new book called Heaven and Nature Sing, perfect for Christmas time, obviously, which is coming up. So tell us. Let's just start off. First of all, tell us about the book. What made you want to write it?
Yeah, so Heaven and Nature Sing kind of is emerging out of a turn my writing took a couple years ago. As we've mentioned, my husband and I are raising our kids in Southwest Virginia, where he is from. So his roots are in this area. And it's, Blue Ridge Mountains, a lot more rural kind of impulses and trends. And we were both raised in that way. And I found that this was kind of creeping up in my writing over the last few years, and I didn't really pay attention to it until other folks started pointing it out. They were like, oh, I love the natural imagery. I love the natural themes. And then I started kind of giving more attention to it and realizing that this was something that I wanted to cultivate and pull forward. And as I developed that through my last couple books, it occurred to me that Christmas and especially Advent presents a really fantastic opportunity to talk about Jesus coming into his own creation, to really pull forward the natural world, because that's what's happening in the incarnation is God coming to his creation. And then, of course, folks probably hear Heaven and Nature Sing as that line from Joy to the World. And I was kind of sitting with that carol. It's by Isaac Watts. And something clicked in my brain that was like, well, what if this wasn't just metaphorical? What if this wasn't just a symbol of Jesus coming to redeem his people? But what if the world was actually celebrating with us during this season? And so that kind of led to wanting to explore natural themes within the creation, within the Christmas story, to say, what are the elements that we might be overlooking, but that could point to the creation receiving the king of creation and celebrating his birth. So that's kind of what the essays are arranged around, is pulling forward specific natural imagery that's in the text of scripture, and then just kind of sitting and meditating on that in context of the larger hope that the creator has come to his creation.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think, just as you were basically like what you just said, like, what can readers maybe, how can they be surprised maybe by, wow, maybe I never would have thought of it like that, just in this time of, as we're preparing, for Christmas. And so what specific things, how specifically does creation grow in us anticipation for Christmas?
Yeah. Well, one of the texts of scripture that kind of foregrounded itself for me was the idea in Romans 8 that the creation is longing and waiting for redemption, for the sons of God, for the children of God to be revealed. And there's this idea that even though we understand that a curse kind of holds sway over our experience of this life, that the earth itself is longing for the creator to come and to release us from that. And so Advent, especially these weeks before Christmas, are the time where we're invited to pay attention to the weight and the brokenness of the world, so that we can understand the joy and the relief that comes when the Savior is finally given to us at Christmas time. And so part of it is just recognizing that we're not alone in our longing for redemption, that we're not alone in our celebration of the King, that the creation around us is also waiting in its own way. I don't want to give the impression that, like this, there's a personification here happening, but that in its own way is waiting. And I think, for me, living where I do, we have 4 seasons. So the cycles of death and rebirth are happening naturally at this time for us in where we are in the Northern Hemisphere. That's not the case for everyone, but for my experience here in the mountains of Virginia, everything's dead. We just had this wonderful summer with harvest and everything looked alive. And then suddenly you walk out your door a few weeks later and there's not a leaf on a tree. All the grass has turned brown. Everything's mud and muck. And so there's this kind of echoing of that sense of, yeah, you know what? That actually is what my life feels like sometimes too. Not all fruitfulness. It's all not productivity. Sometimes there's seasons of, that feel barren, and that into that kind of barrenness, we're inviting the life of Jesus and his redemptive work.
Talking to Hannah Anderson, the author of Heaven and Nature Sing. So, Hannah, as you were writing this and thinking through, like you said, we don't know if it was metaphorical or literal, saying that heaven and nature will sing, and in the word it says, "If we're silent, even the rocks will cry out." You think about things like that. How did it change your view and your appreciation, I guess, of the Christmas season? And did it change anything about the way you celebrate Christmas?
Yeah, it's interesting that this season that is designed to teach us the truth of God coming into human flesh, right? That is the essential theological truth of the incarnation, of God being made a baby in the manger to be our Redeemer. How often we in these moments try to live beyond our human flesh. So we have this strange temptation where Jesus is taking on the limits of humanity while we're trying to escape them. So one of the things I think that happens in this season a lot is we overextend ourselves. We try to pack in as many celebrations as possible. We change up, there's always one more thing we can do, one more present, one more dish. And we really push and resist our human limits, both in our time and our physicality, but also in our emotional life. One of the things that I've experienced over the holidays is this kind of pressure to be happy at every moment because it's the most wonderful time of the year, right? And
Right.
so if you're not really reaching the degrees of holiday festivity that you think you're supposed to have, you can feel like you're failing.
Mm.
But what we have in the incarnation, and specifically the natural world, is an invitation to limit, an invitation to embrace the fact that we aren't God, and that it would be very natural for us not to be able to get it all done, not to be excessively happy at all times. And
Mm.
I find even within nature, even as we talked about before, the fact that we have winter or we have seasons that aren't productive, that's a kind of hint to us that not every season of our own life will be always onward, upward,
Mhm.
productive.
Yeah.
And so for me and for us as a family, this has been kind of permission to let some things go.
Mm.
Feel like, we can do what we can do, but also by acknowledging what we can't do, we're also acknowledging God's ability, his limitlessness to do the things that we can't.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, what you just said was so true. And I think that also kind of touches on the difference between Christmas season and Advent season, right? Which is something that you address in this devotional. And maybe people have heard that term Advent, but they're thinking of, the Hershey's 25, day calendar thing where they get to eat a bit of chocolate every day, right?
Yes, chocolate.
Yes. So, but and so we think of it more as kind of just this, oh, this is a countdown to Christmas, but traditionally it's always been understood to be a season of reflection, and some anticipation, because we know, now on the other side of it, we know what Christmas Day means, but there, moment of reflection, time of prayer, time of fasting. And so what you just said really lines up with that. So maybe dive into that a little bit more about like why, what Advent season has traditionally meant,
Right.
and how it can better help us get in that mindset of anticipating Christmas Day.
Right. And you described it so well that for many in the West and particularly in the United States, because of the way Thanksgiving falls and because of Black Friday, we usually initiate Christmas right after Thanksgiving. But if you think about that cycle, what we're initiating Christmas with is consumption. So this is the first day when you can start consuming, whether it's gifts or, food or whatever. And so from the end of Thanksgiving, the end of November, all the way to December 25th, it has become in our culture almost endless festivity, endless consumption. So by the time you get to Christmas, you're exhausted. You can hardly even enjoy that day because you've had weeks before that were full of feasting. And that makes us want to wrap it up as soon as possible once we're done. We're like, okay, it's Christmas. We're done. Leave the tree up a day or two. Then it's all coming down.
Yep.
We're exhausted. We're done with that. Historically, these weeks before Christmas, to your point, Ezra, were known as Advent, and they were preparation for the celebration. So it was a time of reflection, lament, longing, fasting, so that by the time Christmas Day came, you were ready to pull out all the stops.
Mhm.
And then after Christmas, that's what we would know as like the 12 days of Christmas, if you know that song. You're going from December 25th all the way up to January 6th with your festivities. So you kind of initiate your festivities with the birth of Christ, not with Black Friday.
Right.
Now, we all understand the world we live in. I didn't grow up with Advent rhythms other than, countdown to Christmas, start December 1st, work your way up to December 25th. And I'm not saying that we can reinvent our lives while everything else is carrying us along a certain way. But what we might be able to do is to kind of just put the brakes on a little bit and not feel the obligation to go along with that kind of civil calendar. Like, we could say to ourselves, you know what, I'll do what I need to do. I'll participate in my communal rhythms, my church rhythms, but I'm not going to feel an obligation to be doing all of this celebration ahead of time. And instead, personally, for me, my family, my church, my friends, we're going to take these weeks before Christmas, and we're just going to pace ourselves. We're going to use them for a time of thinking, for longing, for reading, for meditating, and really preparing so that by the time Christmas comes, we can really be present with it and fully own the gift is finally here.
Hannah Anderson, author of Heaven and Nature Sing. You can find the book and her podcast and so much more at sometimesalight.com. You can also see the beautiful illustrations that her husband did for the book and for many other things. Your husband is just a wonderful illustrator. So let's give credit to Nathan, because
credit where credit's due.
Yes, definitely. And hope you guys have a great Christmas and don't have arguments over pie and cake. Just have them both. Just do both of them and get it out of the way. But hope you and your family do have a great Christmas. Thanks so much for joining us, Hannah.
It was great to be with you.
We would love to talk to you again. You're listening to Faith Talk Live. I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
And I'm Ezra Ortiz.
And we will be back.